Okay, we are in the book of Revelation here tonight, and the 20th chapter. I was in a Skype call recently with a class that was discussing premillennialism, and they had come to the conclusion that there is no answer for Revelation 20. And so I gave an answer, and they said that made a lot of sense. I don't have any idea whether it's right or wrong, but I'll try to do the same for you tonight. You may, when we are done, agree with what I say. You may disagree. You may be more confused than you were when we first began. But we're at least going to go through it. And I think at the end it should be interesting for you at least, right? Have you ever had anyone go through Revelation 20 with you?
Clarence taught the whole book of Revelation.
What did he say in Revelation 20?
Bring that up.
Well, let me ask you some questions. We're going to look at who the angel is, the serpent is, the 1,000 years, the first resurrection, and when the devil is loosed for a season. Or the serpent, I should say. Okay? Anybody want to be brave now? And you could probably get who the serpent is, right? Let's start you off with an easy one. Who's the serpent? It's the devil, right? Okay?
That's what it says.
Yes, that's what it says. Okay? Now, what did Clarence say? When did he say he'd be loosed? Let me ask it this way. Have you ever heard anyone give an answer on when the devil will be loosed after the 1,000 years? How about that?
When's the 1,000 years start?
You clearly haven't heard a lesson on this then. Notice that's one of the questions. And my view on when it starts is not a popular view. Okay? So, we're going to begin by reading down through these verses. Chapter 20, you better get it because I may never preach on this again. And unfortunately, we're recording it, so I can't deny this. All right? Chapter 20, you got your questions ready, Tommy?
No, I had to do different portions.
All right.
Than what you're working on.
If I get ahead of you, stop me. Okay? And I saw an angel come down from heaven, having the key of the bottomless pit and a great chain in his hand. And he laid hold on the dragon, that old serpent, which is the devil and Satan, and bound him for 1,000 years. All right. Do we know when this happened from these two verses? Or when it's going to happen? We don't know yet, do we? So let's read on. Cast him into the bottomless pit and shut him up and set a seal upon him, that he should deceive the nations no more till the 1,000 years should be fulfilled, and after that he must be loosed a little season. Okay? So there we are told that after 1,000 years he's going to be loosed a little season. Now when is the 1,000 years? None of you are brave enough? Have you never heard of the 1,000-year reign? You don't have an idea on this? Okay.
1,000 years is one day to the Lord, is one day is 1,000.
All right. So when did that happen, or has it happened yet?
I think it happened when Christ was upon the earth.
Okay. There's a good answer. We've got one brave man. I like that. All right. Let's move on here. And I saw thrones, and they sat upon them, and judgment was given unto them. And I saw the souls of them that were beheaded for the witness of Jesus, for the word of God, and which had not worshipped the beast. Now there we're introduced to a new person, the beast. Okay? Let's write that down. All right. And had not received his mark upon their foreheads or in their hands, and they lived and reigned with Christ for 1,000 years. Okay. But the rest of the dead lived not again until the 1,000 years were finished. And what does he call this period? The first resurrection. Okay? That's important. It gives you a time period. If you could find out when the first resurrection is, or when it will be, or when it was, then you can know something about the 1,000 years, correct? And it also puts a time frame on when the devil was loosed or will be loosed for a little season. Are you with me? Let's read it again. And they lived and reigned with Christ 1,000 years, but the rest of the dead lived not again until the 1,000 years were finished. This is the first resurrection. Okay. Verse 6, blessed and holy is he that hath part in the first resurrection. On such the second death hath no power. Now there's a clue. What is the second death? Yeah, we die once. What's that called? That's our physical death. We're like Rover. We're dead all over, right? Okay. The second death, though, is a spiritual death. But they shall be priests of God and of Christ, and shall reign with him 1,000 years. And when the 1,000 years are expired, Satan shall be loosed out of prison. Now, is this the second 1,000 years, or is he going back? He tells you certain things up to verse 5, and then he gives you a little more detail, I believe, about the same thing. Okay, so we're talking about 1,000-year period. Okay? And when the 1,000 years are expired, Satan shall be loosed out of his prison, and shall go out to deceive the nations which are in the four quarters of the earth, Gog and Magog. Where do you read about Gog and Magog, by the way? The book of Ezekiel, right? Together to battle, the number of whom is as the sands of the sea. And they went up on the breadth of the earth, and compassed the camp of the saints about, and the beloved city. And fire came down from God out of heaven and devoured them. And the devil that deceived them was cast into the lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast, there he is again, where the beast and the false prophet are, and shall be tormented day and night forever and ever. Now verse 11, I saw a great white throne, and him that sat on it, from whose face the earth and the heavens fled away, and there was found no place for them. And I saw the dead, small and great, stand before God, and the books were opened, and another book was opened, which is the book of life. And the dead were judged out of those things which are written in the book, according to their works. And the sea gave up the dead which were in it, and death and hell delivered up the dead which were in them, and they were judged every man according to their works, and death and hell were cast into the lake of fire. This is the second death. And whosoever was not found written in the book of life was cast in the lake of fire. Now, when this book was written, there was not a chapter division. Okay? So we're going to pretend like there's not a big chapter 21 right there. Move right on to the next verse. And I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth were passed away, and there was no more sea. And I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. Okay. There is in the beginning an angel who comes down, and what does he do? He has the key to the bottomless pit, and he has a great chain in his hand. Verse 2, he laid hold on the dragon, that old serpent, and this serpent we know from the text is the devil, or Satan. Okay? Are you with me so far? And what does he do to him? Yes. All right, so he lays hold on the dragon, that old serpent, which is the devil and Satan, and bound him for 1,000 years, and cast him into the bottomless pit, and shut him up, and set a seal on him. Now notice that he should deceive the nations no more, till the 1,000 years should be fulfilled, and after that he must be loosed a season. So the question is, when is the 1,000 years? Well, we may ask, when is the devil going to be bound? Or when was the devil bound? There may be a clue in this phrase, serpent. Is there anywhere in the Bible where we see the devil being punished and bound to a certain place? Genesis. In the very beginning, he is bound. And where is he bound to? The earth. That word there for snake or serpent literally means crawler, or one who crawls on the earth. Okay? Now, what that means can be better understood when we think of the Apostle Peter's words. He speaks of the devil, and he says that the devil cannot be everywhere all at once. We call that omnipresent. God is omnipresent. The devil is not omnipresent. Peter says the devil must go about seeking up whom he may devour. Where does he go about doing that? He goes about doing that on this earth because he was bound to this earth. Now, is that the binding that we're talking about? Well, let's read on. You with me so far? Okay. So, he cast him into the bottomless pit and shut him up and set a seal upon him, that he should deceive the nations no more till the 1,000 years should be fulfilled, and after that he must be loosed a season. Now, if I am saying that the devil's binding began in the Garden of Eden, then clearly I am not reading the 1,000 years as being literal, am I? God owns 1,000 cattle on a hill. Does that mean that God only owns 1,000 cattle on a hill, or does God own every cattle on every hill and every vale and every valley and every province of the world? And so the 1,000 is a representation for a ginormous number in the Jewish mind. And so here is this ultimate number, thousands upon thousands. This is 1,000 years. Now let's follow that thinking. If we are saying that the 1,000 years began with the devil being bound in the Garden of Eden, then how do we explain that there were those who were reigning with Christ in the Old Testament? All through this book of Revelation, we see that Christ is king and has always been king. We find the altar of God where there are saints who are standing in front of it, and they are singing the song of Moses and the song of the Lamb. But they are followers of Christ as a king who has reigned pre-incarnate. He is the Alpha and the Omega, this book will tell us. He always has been, he always will be. And so then, could this passage be encompassing or allowing for Old Testament saints to be part of this? The rest of the book of Revelation does. And so then, let's go a little farther. At the end of this 1,000 years, he is loosed a little season. During the 1,000 years, he does not have the ability to deceive what? The nations. What does that mean? Let's say that began in the garden. What did he have? How did he deceive the nations? What was his plan? His plan all along was to thwart the gospel. I'm not spelling that right. If you cannot see the board, you all need to move forward. To thwart the gospel. By the way, pealed forth in joyous lays. Did you notice that first song? Pealed forth in joyous lays. You all sang that. What in the world does that mean? You all sang it with enthusiasm. What does the word lays mean? It's what you get down at the Food Lion. It comes in a bag, right? So, joyous lays, it is to make a design or to make a plan. As a matter of fact, we use the word best laid plans in that. So, that's what that phrase meant. But, boy, when we sang that, first of all, I couldn't sing it because Johnny gave me this worm, and I could barely chew it up. But here, how did he thwart the gospel? What was he constantly trying to do? He was constantly trying to eliminate who? The Jews. Think of all the times he did it. He tried it in Egypt, right? He tried it in Jerusalem. He tried it with Esther. I mean, there are numerous times. And then, in the time of Christ, he tempts Jesus. All of this is done to thwart the gospel, okay? And to keep Jesus off of the cross, okay? Now, at the end of this 1,000 years then, what's going to happen? He is going to be able to deceive the nations. How is he going to do this? Well, he's going to do some recruiting. Who is he going to recruit? He's going to recruit the beast and the false prophets. Okay? Who is the beast? What's that?
Nero.
Surely I love you. She said Nero. Bless her heart. We're just going to say Rome tonight. I don't want everybody to have a heart attack on the internet. Okay? How about this? Don't give Randy an eraser. He might throw it at me back there. Who's the false prophets?
Beast of the field?
What's that?
Was it a beast of the field?
Well, matter of fact, there are different beasts that are mentioned in the book of Revelation. There's one of the land and there's one of the sea. Okay?
Well, I was saying chapter 3.
Yeah.
Chapter 3 of Genesis, it said this serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field.
More subtle.
More subtle.
Yep, subtle. S-U-B.
T-I-L.
Yep. So this beast is not this beast here. But this beast is a representation of this beast. Are you confused now? This is not working, Laura. Why'd you give me this one? Okay.
Are you saying that the devil could not deceive nations?
No, he did deceive the nations, but to what extent? All right? Here's the question. He is loosed. So he had the ability on earth to do certain things. And we know all through the Old Testament that he did. Okay?
Right, so what I'm saying is...
But at the end of this 1,000 years, he is loosed to do what he's been planning, but to a greater level. He's been trying to deceive. Matter of fact, what does his name mean? Deceiver. That's his job. His job was the deceiver back in the garden. He deceived all through the Old Testament. But now he is going to deceive a particular thing. What is it? He's going to deceive the nations, which means he's going to recruit nations. What nations is he going to recruit? The nations are Rome. And who are these false prophets?
You still lost me on when you're saying that he was bound and when he was loose.
Yes, he's bound in the beginning, but he still has the ability. He's bound here. So he can do all his work here for 4,000 years. Well, we talked this morning. We're not certain just exactly how long. But however long the devil was here, he was bound and his work was done in this world, which is interesting. He goes before God in the book of Job. And you remember the question God asked him? Have you considered my servant Job? And what did the devil say? No, because you have a hedge around him. Conceding that why would I consider him when you're controlling everything? All right? Now, the ability to deceive nations is done under the purview of God allowing him no longer to be bound in that way, but letting him loose and giving him free rein. Free rein to do one thing, to deceive the nations. What nations will he use? He will use Rome. Did that help, by the way, Andy? Okay. And who's the false prophet? Who are the false prophets? All through the Old Testament, the prophets, Isaiah, Daniel, Ezekiel, warned against false prophets, false shepherds. Who were they? I'm going to put this. Laura, you gave me another bad one.
It's a blue one. Well, we know them because what they prophesied doesn't come true.
Yes.
The reason why that doesn't help me is because you're saying he's bound here, but there has to be a period of time where he's loose. So
We're getting there.
okay.
Yes. So, well, after the 1,000 years. After the 1,000 years where he's bound, he is loose. Now the idea is, what kind of loosing is it? He is given more free rein. I shouldn't even say free rein. He is given rein to do something. So after the 1,000 years, he is able to deceive the nation. That is given by the authority of God. God allows him to do that. Where he was bound in that sense before, now he can deceive the nations in this way. What nations? Rome and Israel. Okay? All right. Any other questions on that? By the way, how long have I talked here? Okay. So then, we're going to get a little bit of some explanation. He's going to go back through. Verse 4, I saw thrones, and they sat upon them, and judgment was given unto them. And I saw the souls of them that were beheaded for the witness of Jesus and for the word of God, and which had not worshipped the beast, neither his image, neither had his mark upon their forehead or in their hands, and they lived and reigned with Christ for 1,000 years. Who are these people? Stephen said they killed every prophet that there was. All right? When we read the book of Hebrews and we see chapter 11, we know that they killed the saints of God. And then when we get to the New Testament in the book of Revelation, we are aware that there are martyrs who are dying. So in the Old Testament, you've got this going on, okay? In the New Testament, Rome is running things. But the question is Rome the great persecutor here that is causing the Christians to be beheaded and is causing the Christians to die in this way? Well, we have a hint. Neither received his mark upon their foreheads or in their hands. All through the Bible and in the ancient world, there was only one group I know of that put something between their foreheads and on their hands.
I saw one the other day,
Okay.
long rope, inch square, red blocks right between his eyes and his forehead.
All right. You're probably thinking of a Hindu or Hare Krishna. I always thought it was bizarre they called them Hare Krishnas when they had very little hair. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. So these Jews who have their phylactery, that might be something that's going on. And again, that's not the most popular, and some of you may disagree with that, but I think it's a hint. Now he says, the rest of the dead live not again until the 1,000 years were finished, and he calls this the first resurrection. Now, who wrote the book? Has John ever talked about the first resurrection anywhere else in the Bible?
They must be talking about John 5:28.
John 5, I'm in John 5, but you skip to verse 28. I would rather you look at verse 25. Okay, let's go back to verse 25. John chapter 5 and verse 25. And what does he say? Verily, verily, I say unto you, he that heareth my word and believeth on him that sent me hath everlasting life, and shall not come unto condemnation, but is passed from death unto life. Verse 25, verily, verily, I say unto you, the hour is coming, and when? Now is. When was now? At that present time. When the dead shall hear the voice of the Son of God, and they that hear shall live. For as the Father hath life in himself, so hath he given to the Son to have life in himself, and has given him authority to execute judgment also, because he is the Son of Man. The Son of Man is a reference back to Daniel 7 and 13. And in Daniel 7:13, we see Jesus ascending to who? The Ancient of Days, which is who? God. When did that happen? That happened at his ascension. And what is he given during that time? He is given all power and authority and a dominion that will last how long? Okay. So, he links the period of time when it happens. At the resurrection of Jesus, and ultimately at his ascension. I think it happened at his resurrection. I shouldn't have circled the ascension. I was too quick on that. But I think that when he rose from the grave, he went to be with God, and it was during that time that he was given all power. He would say to the apostles in Matthew 28, all power is given unto me in heaven and on earth. And so his dominion begins then. It is this dominion that is being spoken of. Okay? This is the first resurrection, which if Christ's resurrection is the first resurrection, it is important to all saints, because at that point then, the saints no longer have to wait for the blood of Christ to cover them, but at his death, burial, and resurrection, the blood flowed backward and covered them and flows forward for all of us. This, I believe, is the first resurrection. Now that's very quick. So now we have a time frame. We have the 1,000 years where the saints reigned with Christ. I think it's speaking of all the holy saints of all time. The devil has been bound, but at the end of the 1,000 years, he's loosed. When then does that happen? If that happens at Christ's death, burial, and resurrection, the 1,000 years is up and the devil is loosed. What happens then during this period of time? Notice that during the time of Christ's ministry, the devil is doing more things than we've ever seen him do all through the Bible. And after, we see the devil really putting the clamps and trying to thwart, not necessarily here, the cross of Jesus, but he focuses in on who? On the church. The church is part of this world. And if you're going to destroy the church, you have to, where's the word deceive? You have to deceive the nations and bring the nations with all their power against the early church. All right. Back to Revelation 20. Are you folks with me so far? I'm going to have to be done here because I think I've gone. How long am I gone, Tommy?
Oh, about 20 minutes.
Okay. I doubt I can go to midnight. You and I might be the only one here. Okay. All right. So, where was I? So when the 1,000 years are expired, he is loosed for a little season. And he shall go, Andy, verse 8, and deceive the nations which were where? In the 4 quarters of the earth. All right? Both of these nations are that way. I read just a couple weeks ago that 1 in 10 people in the Roman Empire were Jewish. That's amazing. But here then you see Rome rules the entire known world at that time. Okay? And consequently, what's going on? The devil is working with his beast and with his prophets to eliminate the church. Now then, Gog and Magog in the book of Ezekiel is clearly a prophecy of something that is going to happen in the church age. We do not have time tonight to discuss all of the mysteries of the book of Ezekiel. So, Tommy, save that for when we do the book of Ezekiel. But they're going to gather together after this 1,000 years, after the devil is loosed for a season. It's going to culminate in what? Here we go. A battle. All right. That makes sense, doesn't it? Going to get all the nations together. You're going to come against the church, and you're all going to meet in one spot for a battle. Well, and the number is like the number of the seas. Now then, this begins to shift. The die is cast. The drama begins to unfold, and the plan begins to turn back against the devil and the beast and against the prophets. They give you a location here, and they went up on the breadth of the earth. By the way, that word earth there is the word land. On the breadth of the land, encompassed the camp of the saints about, and here we are given the name of a city. What is that city? Shirley, was that you that said Jerusalem? Bless your heart. It's called the beloved city. Now, the beloved city. This is interesting because it also calls it the camp of the saints. In other parts of the book of Revelation, when speaking of this city, it calls that city the great city. It speaks of it as the harlot. All right? In chapter 11, we are taken into this city. In chapter 11 and verse 1, there was given me a reed like unto a rod, and the angel stood, saying, Rise and measure what? The temple of God, and the altar, and them that worship therein. But the court which is without the temple leave out, and measure it not, for it is given unto the Gentiles. And the holy city shall be tread under foot 42 months. And I will give power unto my 2 witnesses, and they shall prophesy 1,260 days, clothed in sackcloth. These are the 2 olive trees and the 2 candlesticks standing before the God of the earth. And if any man will hurt them, fire proceeded out of their mouth and devoureth their enemies. And if any man will hurt them, he must be in this manner killed. These have power to shut heaven, and it rain not in the days of their prophecy, and have power over waters to turn them to blood, and to smite the earth with all plagues as often as they will. And when they shall have finished their testimony, the pit that ascendeth, or the beast that ascendeth out of the bottomless pit, shall make war against them. Now we are in this period, right? He comes out of the bottomless pit, he is loose for a little season, and he's going to make war against them. And their dead bodies shall lie in the street of the great city, which spiritually is called Sodom and Egypt. And then they tell you what happened there. What does it say? And the Lord was crucified there. Where was the Lord crucified? In Jerusalem. Okay. Now then, back to 20. You notice I haven't given you any of those answers concerning Jerusalem. You all have supplied answers, and I'm okay with that. Now then, they compassed the camp of the saints, and the devil that deceived them was cast in the lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and the false prophet are, and shall be tormented day and night forever. And then you have a picture of judgment. Now then, I'm out of time, so I want to go to chapter 21. And I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth were passed away, and there was no more sea. When did this happen? It hasn't. Go back to Isaiah chapter 65 and verse 17. Now, look at verse 15. And ye shall leave your name for a curse unto the chosen, for the Lord God shall slay thee and call his servants by another name. When did God give his people a name, and what was it? He gave them the name Christian. Yes, Acts 11. Verse 16, that he who blesses himself in the earth shall bless him in the God of truth, and he that sweareth in the earth shall swear by God of truth, because the former troubles are forgotten, and because they are hid from mine eyes. For behold, I create new heavens and a new earth, and the former things shall not be remembered, nor come into mind. But be ye glad and rejoice forever in that I create for, and behold, I create Jerusalem a rejoicing, and her people a joy. And I will rejoice in Jerusalem, and joy in my people. And the voice of weeping shall be no more heard in the land, in her, nor the voice of crying. What is this a prophecy of in the book of Isaiah? It's a prophecy of the church, folks. And so when did this happen? This new heaven and this new earth. Do you see this? All right. We see the establishment. In chapter 12, we find that there is a woman who has a man-child. He's quoting Isaiah 66 when the question is asked, who knows a nation born in one day? There's only one nation I know of that was ever born in one day, and what is that? The kingdom of God, the church. It was born in one day, the day of Pentecost. And this new heaven and new earth that Isaiah sees coming down with a new Jerusalem, as opposed to what? An old Jerusalem. What's going to happen to the old Jerusalem? They're going to encompass the camp of the saints. And the beloved city is going to, in verse 9 of chapter 20, there is going to be fire that comes down from God out of heaven, and it's going to devour them. When did that happen? To the old Jerusalem as opposed to the new. (70 AD). Turn to Acts chapter 2. We have an image, a picture of the church being established from Joel in Joel chapter 2. And in Acts chapter 2, that prophecy is fulfilled, right? Now it is fulfilled, but it is not exhausted. How do we know that? Well, if you go to Acts chapter 2, you see that Joel's prophecy is fulfilled at Pentecost, but notice it doesn't stop there. In verse 19, Peter continues to quote the book of Joel, and he says concerning the fulfillment, he says, and I will show wonders in heaven above and signs in the earth beneath, blood and fire and vapor of smoke. The sun shall be turned into darkness, the moon into blood, before the great and notable day of the Lord come. And so even in Acts 2, when that prophecy of the church happens, it is not entirely exhausted until 70 AD, when Jerusalem is destroyed with blood and fire and vapor and smoke. But this new heaven and this new earth and this new Jerusalem exist. After the devil has been loosed, his plans have been thwarted, these nations are taken out of the way because Rome no longer has Israel to do its bidding. Or rather, we could say that vice versa. And the power of this nation is utterly destroyed. One thing about this book that we must remember. Did Rome destroy itself in the first few centuries? This is a question that I have when it comes to the book of Revelation. You know, there are a lot of places that speak of Rome, I think, in the book of Revelation. But this city, this beloved city, or this harlot, or this whore, the Bible says in the book of Revelation, all right? something happens to her. In chapter 17 and verse 16, and the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast. So the 10 horns are riding the beast. And they shall hate the whore. Who is the whore? The whore of Babylon, that great city. Okay? So they hate her. And the 10 horns, which we believe to be Rome, the beast, which we believe to be Rome, what will they do to the great city? What will they do to the whore or the harlot? What do? They make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh and burn her with fire. If the harlot or the great city, if they are all Rome, then how does Rome attack and eat its own flesh and burn itself within a period of time that is given in the book of Revelation? When does it say these things will come to pass? Shortly. Whatever nation is being dealt with by God, it is to vindicate the martyrs who have died. And whatever nation it is, that nation is utterly destroyed. And God shows his power to vindicate the saints by destroying that nation. Now, I don't know about you, but Rome wasn't destroyed for a long time. And there's only one nation we know of that was destroyed, that was prophesied by Jesus through his authority, to where no one in the rest of the world for all the ages could deny that God was the one that destroyed it, and that was the city of Jerusalem in his prophecy of Matthew 24. If I ask the average person who destroyed Rome, are they going to say God? No. But everyone knows the prophecy of Matthew 24, where Jesus said this city is going to be destroyed, and they're going to compass about. By the way, in chapter 11, I could have read that they compassed about for 42 months. By the way, that's 3.5 years. That is exactly the time that they surrounded the camp of the saints, the pleasant city that Daniel talks about. Okay. Did you all get that? Some of it. Well, what part didn't you get? The end of it. Here's the end. Did you notice when I went back to read Isaiah 65 what would happen in that new Jerusalem? What would happen in that new heavens and new earth? It was a prophecy of the church. And you notice what it said there would be none of in that prophecy of the church? It may be no more crying. No more tears. And I want to tell you folks something. I know Randy will agree with me on this one. Not everything I said tonight. But one thing we will agree on is, I think the church has missed one of its greatest blessings by applying these last 2 chapters of Revelation to the end of the world and heaven. Because I want to tell you something. If you read them in their first century context, you don't have to wait till you die for tears to be removed. You don't have to wait till you die for there to be peace in your life. That happens now. The no more tears, that was prophesied of the church age. No more tears. What kind of tears? If you go back in Isaiah, which I don't have time to tonight, you're going to find out that all of these things that were going on to thwart the gospel, we don't have to fear anymore. And the biggest enemy of all is an enemy called death. This chapter even specifies, calls it second death, as if the first death isn't scary enough. Do we have to fear death in the church age?
Spiritual death, you better fear.
We don't have to if we put our trust here. If we've let him cover us with his blood, which is the invitation I'm giving you tonight, the only way that you don't have to fear the second death is if you have been covered with the blood of Christ.
And you're faithful to the end.
Matter of fact, this book, chapter 2, says, be thou faithful unto death, and I will give you what? Crown of life. Okay? And by the way, if you're going to have the blood of Christ covering you and cleansing you, it is a lifetime of faith, because the Bible tells us, John says in another place, that his blood continually cleanses us. It's not just something that happens when you walk down the aisle and are baptized. So we don't have to fear the second death. And we don't have to wait till the end of the world before tears can be wiped from our eyes and this fear can be taken away. All right? I'm done. Thank you all for your fine attention. I hope that answered some questions.